So we'll go ahead and get started here this morning. Thank you everybody for being here. Dan is pointing at me. I think that was my go time. All right, so this is the SSACon Interfaith panel. We have assembled here some of the brightest and finest people in Interfaith, which is not an exclusive group whatsoever, to talk to you about things that we've done, seen, heard, experienced, heard about, or otherwise might guess at. We're going to pretend we know what we're doing. So first, to assure you all of how much we can pretend we know what we're doing, I'm going to ask all of our panelists to give a quick introduction of themselves, where they're from, what they're doing, and sort of like what interfaith path brings them to this table right here today. So, Lori, do you want to get started?
I will start. My name is Lori Fazzino. I am a doctoral candidate in sociology at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. Go Las Vegas! I'm also teaching faculty at Claremont Lincoln University in their Interfaith Action program. And so I do a lot of work with teaching my students how to approach religion, how to engage in interfaith, not only dialogue, but action in the public sphere, and helping them really carry out sort of their interfaith goals on a real practical and everyday level.
I'm Nicole. I'm from Madison, Wisconsin, and I'm the president of Atheist Humanists and Agnostics. We are the secular group on campus, and we do a lot of interfaith work with different groups on campus as well. So we'll do forums with a group called Badger Catholic. We've done panels before with different representatives from the Hindu Association, the Muslim Association, the Catholic Association. So yeah.
Hello. Ooh, I like the sound of my voice in this mic. Can we get a little intimate for a second? Y'all should have never gave me a microphone. This is gonna be bad. My name is JT Snipes, and I work for the Interfaith Youth Corps. By show of hands, how many of you are familiar with IFYC? No one.
You've got some work to do.
I know, we got a lot of work to do. How many of you are familiar with Ibu Patel? We got a lot of work to do. Okay, so the organization that I work for has a mission to make interfaith cooperation a social norm, which is a very big idealistic vision for our world, because we believe that working together across lines of religious and philosophical difference has the ability to transform some of the systemic issues and problems that we face in the United States. My job is actually campus assessments manager. So we actually administer two surveys. One is formally called the Campus Religious Spiritual Climate Survey. And the second is IDEALS, which stands for the Interfaith Diversity, Experiences, and Attitudes Longitudinal Survey. Try saying that 6 times fast. But basically the idea is that we need measures of interfaith cooperation because we believe that pluralism is important, something that we should be striving for, regardless of whether you're a Christian, Jew, Muslim, atheist, agnostic, free thinker. The world is better together when we're in dialogue. So I'm already talking a lot, and I'm just gonna say one thing. I feel like I have to plug what's happening in my organization, so forgive the blatant plug, but we have the Interfaith Leadership Institute, which actually brings students together to talk about how interfaith works. And we train what we think are the future leaders of interfaith on college campuses. So if you're interested, I have flyers and information on how to get you there. It's in Chicago. It's a great city, lots of fun. Hopefully you'll come and check it out. And I'm gonna be quiet now.
So it occurred to me that I probably ought to say at least a little bit about my experience with interfaith as well, since I'm up here. Otherwise, what the heck am I doing moderating this panel? I have been a proponent of including secular students in the interfaith circles since like 2009, when shit kind of hit the fan with Everybody Draw Muhammad Day. And since then, I've been working with the Interfaith Youth Corps. I've been working with the ACPA, the Student Affairs National Organization. I'm a member of the directorate for the Commission for Spirituality, Faith, Religion, and Meaning. There's another mouthful. And JT is actually a colleague of mine on that commission. And I've been to one of the Interfaith Youth Corps Interfaith Leadership Institutes. I've been to a number of interfaith retreats and convolations and conclaves and things and stuff. And my goal is to make the interfaith circle more welcoming to secular students and secular people in general, but focusing on students and helping to work with secular students and secular groups to understand the value of participation in interfaith. So I have a totally blatant agenda. So along the lines of my totally blatant agenda, what I'd love to have everyone talk for just a couple of minutes about, actually, no, I want to ask you guys some questions first. Show of hands, how many people have been involved in some interfaith work already? Good. How many people have not been but are sort of like checking it out, thinking about it, like that are new to interfaith noobs? Good, good, we've got a good spread. Is there anybody here for another reason? Yeah, you.
I'm recording.
That guy's recording us, but we like having him here, that's important. Okay, another show of hands. Raise your hand if you're from a public or state institution. Okay, raise your hand if you are from a religiously affiliated campus. Yeah, all right, awesome. Anybody from a private but not religiously affiliated campus? Yeah, got a bunch of those. Okay, good, good. So I'm doing that so that I and my colleagues up here know what sort of the context that you're coming from so that we can speak to them a little more effectively. So let's go ahead and get to it. I'm going to ask the obvious question. Why should secular students be involved in interfaith?
How many of you are familiar with the 2014 Pew Temperature Survey? Show of hands. That was the survey where people from different faith traditions and non-religious traditions were asked to rate by temperature, people from other traditions. And atheists were rated 41 degrees, which is pretty damn cold. There's another finding that came out of that study, and that finding was when people knew somebody from different traditions, they were more likely to rate the group warmer. My goal for just our movement is normalization and the reduction of stigma. And I imagine that that's a lot of your goals, too. If we want to normalize our position, if we want to normalize non-belief in the United States, it's going to require us to engage with people that are not like us, people with different beliefs. And what better way to do that through interfaith work? And not just dialogue and talking about, our beliefs or going in there and trying to, deconvert, but actually going in there and working with one another for a common purpose. When we do that, we express our secular values. And that's the way that we're going to normalize and reduce stigma. So if that's your goal, like it's my goal, then I ask that you join with me, and that's why we should be in interfaith cooperation together.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Normalizing our beliefs is something that I think everybody would like to happen in the future, hopefully near future, but can't be too optimistic. But I also think another really important facet of interfaith is just the acceptance of other people. And when you accept other people, you can create bigger and better outcomes. Like 3 organizations working together towards the same goal, you're gonna, generate a much bigger product than you would just by doing it yourselves. And also, then you create something in common with them. And you have memories together, and you're like building those relationships. And it's really hard to dislike somebody for if you have a solid relationship with them.
I don't have much to add, except we've been administering the CRSES, so it's a campus climate survey on spiritual and religious life on campuses. And we have 6 years of data from, I think, over 56 institutions, close to 50,000 respondents. So we have a pretty big sample size of students. And one of the questions that we ask are about appreciative attitudes. And similar to the temperature survey, atheists have some of the lowest, students have lower appreciative attitudes toward atheists. right? So that's the reality. You guys know already in terms of normalizing or acceptance, there's an uphill climb. But there is hope, and it's through interfaith work. And my colleagues on the panel have already spoken to the external benefits of you participating, but there's also some internal benefits. So some of the things that we ask are, we measure pluralism orientation. So how do students get along with folks who come from different traditions than their own? And there are two groups that consistently do not participate or have lower rates of participation in interfaith work. Any guesses on who those two populations are? Evangelicals is one. Atheists are the other. These are the two groups least likely to participate in interfaith activities on college campuses. Not coincidentally, they're the groups that, when participating in interfaith efforts, show the most gains in pluralism orientation. So it's critical for you all to be a part of these conversations, not only for the growth of the folks in other traditions, but for your own growth and for your own understanding of how the world operates, because you get a lot out of it. So that's my brief plug for your participation in it. It's vital for you all to be a part of these conversations, in both towards normalizing efforts and for your own development as well.
Again, what was the survey called?
The survey is called it's the campus, it's the CRSES, so the campus spiritual, this is embarrassing.
So I know that Nick has postcards about this in the SSA office. If you ask him for those IFYC postcards about the survey, he'll know what you're talking about.
Yes, CRSES is if you go to IFYC/CRSES, you can read a lot more information about it. The current study is ideals, and you can also go to IFYC/ideals and see more about what's currently happening with research, because that's the longitudinal study that I'm a part of.
I'm gonna just throw out a footnote that at least 3 of us up here are giant data research nerds, and there's some awesome research happening, but the 2 studies that JT's talking about are really, really fascinating. So if you are a data nerd, you should check them out.
Can I add something?
Yeah, please do.
How many of you, by show of hands, have exclusively atheist, agnostic, free-thinking friends or family members? Just exclusively, that's it. You have nobody else. You interact with nobody else who's religious, has faith, is spiritual. Solely just atheist, agnostic, free thinkers, friends, and family. Just, okay, maybe 1 or 2 hands. Here's the thing. On our campuses, there's a whole level of religious diversity. And so there's really no choice but to at least confront people of different faith traditions. So engaging in interfaith, yeah, we can absolutely, with what Nicole said, we can do more things together, and it is harder to dislike somebody and dehumanize somebody, right? And to what JT was saying about the internal benefits, interfaith friendship, they're awesome, and there's no choice but to confront. And there's a high likelihood that some of you might engage, participate in interreligious marriage, right? Interreligious friendship. I mean, what I'm trying to say here is the benefits to doing this are not just, are we going to achieve movement goals, right? Or are we going to, end poverty or food insecurity or really handle social justice issues in a much bigger way. But interfaith work also happens on the micro level, and it happens on the, the interactional level, just between one another. So I just want to throw out there, when we're talking about interfaith, what does that actually mean, and sort of where does that occur? Right? It's not just the big things, or it's not just on your campus, it's not just within the organizations, but it occurs in our interactions as well.
I'm gonna do some really brass tacks additions onto this. How many of you could do more on your campus if you had access to more resources? Okay, I'm gonna guess that some of you are just not answering, because I've never talked to a student group that has not said we could use more money. Actually, I have talked to one, but outlier data point. And so here's the thing, when it comes down to the rubber meeting the road, Interfaith is a big push on university campuses right now, and there are a lot of resources being put into interfaith type programs. And those resources are going to get used, and they're going to get allocated. And you can sit at that table, and you can participate, and you can benefit from those resources, or you can stand by the sidelines. And it's you know, I mean, a little bit preaching to the choir here, because most of you are here because you do interfaith work, or you're you're excited about doing it. But you know, like I'm baffled by people who the reality that come from a marginalized group, and yet we would choose to continue marginalizing ourselves. It just seems like such a great opportunity to get out there and have and claim a seat at that table. So you know, just the totally capitalistic reasons of like, hey, you can get more stuff to make your group better, more awesome. You know, let's do it.
If I can touch on the resources a little bit. So I started going to college at University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire, and the group was very small. We had like 6 people. We didn't have any money. We just kind of used like the free markers and paper and made signs every once in a while. And we didn't even know what SSA was until our president found, like, I don't know, something online and applied, and we got a free banner and all this stuff. And the resources are there if you just ask. It's like a job. You're not going to get a job by sitting and doing nothing. You just have to ask. And honestly, like, some of the organizers at SSA are the nicest people I have ever met. And even if you email them with like a really like desperate question of like, we really want to do this program, we don't have any money, they'll be like, how much do you need? Fill this form out, you got it. So definitely don't be afraid to ask. I definitely recommend talking to Pete Zupan or Nick Stancato, because they have been very helpful for me in the past.
Gordon Maples isn't half bad either.
I agree.
Okay, so I'm gonna now that we've raved about all the really good and perhaps obvious reasons that you should get involved in interfaith, I'm gonna flip the tables a little bit. I'm gonna encourage our panelists to talk about some things that maybe have not gone so well, so that we are not looking at this through rose-colored glasses. The reality is that it's a little complicated. So I want to see if we can get some stories about things that have been a little awkward, things that we've tried that haven't worked, the things that you might want to look out for if you're getting involved in interfaith programs on your campus.
So I was having a conversation with JT last night, and we were like, okay, how's this going pear-shaped for us? And it was like crickets. So I'm hard-pressed to actually talk about what hasn't really gone badly or you know, really not gone so well. But I do have, I was able to reach into the recesses of my mind to come up with something. So 4 years ago, Westboro Baptist Church decided to come to Las Vegas. And our SSA group contacted the Interfaith Varsity and said, hey, do you want to do something to protest this together? And they were amenable to that. We thought we knew where the Westboro Baptists were going to be protesting. We thought they were coming onto the free speech zone on our campus. And so we had made a plan to raise some money, and engage with Interfaith Varsity, and we're just going to create sort of like a barrier and everything. Then we were made aware that Westboro Baptist was not going to be allowed to come onto our campus. And so we had to kind of shift things around really quickly. Interfaith Varsity decided they wanted to stay where we had already agreed to be, and they were just going to pray. We went where we were told that Westboro Baptist was going to be protesting, and we held our signs, and you know, we engaged with the news media that came out to cover the story, and that's it. They just didn't, you know, so they just didn't roll with us. But there was no animosity. There were no real problems. Like, you know, less numbers, and so that was sort of disappointing for us. But we understood that, you know, they're going to do their thing, and this is the decision that they wanted to make, and we just, you know, there was a bigger issue, and that was that protest, and so we just moved forward, and that was it.
Yeah, so you just said the word phrase less numbers, and interfaith is like a relatively newer idea, right? Because now we're, you know, starting to see the benefits and necessity of it. So for those of you who maybe have done a couple interfaith events and like maybe 4 people came and you didn't think it was worth your time, or maybe you've never tried one and you really want to, you know, get at least 25 people there, but you're not sure how to, like, don't get discouraged if there isn't a large amount of people, because it's not the sexiest title. It's not like, let's engage in interfaith discussion on Tuesday night. Like, that's like it's a hard sell if they don't really understand what it is. And interfaith is also like relatively new as like an actual like constructive like program loosely termed. I did a little, you know, historical research on it, and it wasn't actually implemented in terms of like being coordinated until the 1930s. So in terms of, you know, religious organizations and non-religious organizations, it's fairly new. So I just wanted to say, like, don't get discouraged if your numbers are low. Atheists, Humanists, and Agnostics at UW-Madison will have an event, and we'll have a discussion with Badger Catholic, and only maybe like 6 people come, and we're like, well, shoot, like we advertised, we did everything, but all the discussion that we had is just as valuable with less people as it would be with more. So keep that in mind.
So like Lori, I racked my brain to think about the struggles of interfaith work, and inevitably I came to my own experiences in just communicating across lines of religious and philosophical difference. So I'm actually gonna twist it a little bit and talk about my high school experience, because this is like, to me, this is the problem with our lack of interfaith literacy, right? So I, as a high school sophomore, worked in a gymnastics place called Hugs, Harris Unlimited Gymnastics School. And I don't know if I said this, but I actually identify as a Christian, which may surprise a lot of folks in here. But at the time was very strident in my own Christianity and assumed that everybody was Christian. Also, I grew up in Texas, which I'm like, as I'm telling this story, it might be helpful to add that context, right? So I really grew up in a space where there weren't a lot of people who weren't Christian. It was what everybody was. So I remember working in this gym, and on Wednesday nights I would go to Bible study, and I remember getting ready to go to Bible study, and I sat down and was waiting on my mom, and somehow the topic of Mormons came up, and I ignorantly said, well, Mormons are not good people, they're really weird, and they're going to hell. Right? That's me. I hope I haven't like alienated everyone in this room to listening to what I'm talking about. But I didn't get the feedback from my friend Kara, who was sitting next to me, who I'm just like railing on and on about how terrible Mormons are. She just calmly and patiently puts her hand up and says, I identify as Mormon. And in that moment, I had never, when you're only around people who identify in the ways in which you identify, it becomes easy to dehumanize the other folks. And that there are other spaces on my own interfaith journey that are important. But I think going into college, it had a negative effect in terms of my willingness to engage. And even to this day, there's still a little fear of engaging with others because I'm afraid that I'm not going to say the right thing, or I'm going to offend someone. And if the goal of interfaith work is to provide some level of cooperation, it makes people very nervous about saying the right thing or doing the right thing or not having enough knowledge to engage. But this is why I think interfaith work is so important, because it provides a safe space for you to do that. I know a lot of your groups offer Ask an Atheist Day, right? And that at its core is getting at interfaith cooperation, giving folks the space and room to get to know each other, and to see that we're not aliens. Like, we are all human beings and worthy of respect and love.
I'm just over here making faces. I'm storytelling with you. So in some ways I get to be sort of a meta-analysis because of the time I've spent at the Secular Student Alliance. I have seen a lot of student groups working in interfaith contexts. And so I have seen some of them go poorly. Well, it will come in just a second. So in general, almost every time I have seen an interaction go poorly, it has come because the expectations were not made clear up front. And JT said something that I think is really, really important. It's a safe space. And the fact that it's a safe space, we want to differentiate between a safe space and a comfortable space, because sometimes interfaith conversations are not comfortable, but they need to be safe. And so setting the expectation with your group members and setting the expectation with any groups that you're working with about what's acceptable and what's not is going to be really important to having a successful event. If you don't make those boundaries clear, then you'll have that guy in your group who decides that his personal mission is to deconvert every human he ever comes across, and all of a sudden he's trying to argue with every other person in the interfaith group and telling them that they're wrong, and that's not going to lead to a constructive conversation. And the long and short of it is that some people are not in a place where interfaith is going to be the best fit for them right then. And it's okay. Not everybody in your group has to participate in an interfaith event. Not every member of your group is going to come to all of every event, of any event. And that's okay. But if you aren't setting the expectations up front of what the event is going to be and sort of how, what's going to be acceptable and what maybe is not going to be the right idea to bring to the table at this time, that's going to set yourselves up for a rougher time than if you sit down and really make those expectations clear in advance. That's like the number one thing I could say from the experience I've seen over the years.
And something else is, we talk about the safe spaces, and some people really have a problem with that language. I've actually moved away from the safe space language in the classroom, and I've moved to a language of spaces of civility, right? So within my classroom with my students, physically, yes, you're going to be safe, of course. I'm scrappy, you're going to be safe. I've never hit a student, of course. But you should be emotionally safe, right? Like Liz said, some of these conversations are going to be uncomfortable, and they should be uncomfortable. This is something new that we're all trying to work out. But these conversations need to be civil. We need to be civil to one another because we are humans. And so for people that might have group members that might not like that safe space language, that's an alternative, these spaces of civility.
And I would even, in terms of my background's in higher education, student affairs, and there are constant conversations around safe space. And within the field, there's a push towards brave spaces. So I think Liz articulated it very well, that it's not necessary for you to be comfortable, right? What is our end goal? And I think the ethos of higher education student affairs as a field is around social justice. So how are we moving our students toward procuring greater justice for those who are experiencing inequalities across the board? And I think there is a cross section specifically for you all organizing as secular groups with particularly the interfaith movement. And I have to put a plug for the ILI because that's what that training does. It teaches you, it gives you an opportunity to role play. We use case studies to help you begin anticipating the challenges that are going to come up on your campus. Because right now, college campuses are a hotbed of activity when you think about the BDS movement that is rising on campus. So when we talk about interfaith...
Can you unpack that acronym for us?
It's Boycott, Divestment, Sanction. It's a pro-Palestinian group that explicitly speaks out against the occupied state of Israel. So for Jewish students, that's really rough. And there are students that who identify as Jewish, but do not support Israel in terms of their violation of human rights acts. So it's a very complicated situation when when you're saying we want to bring together Muslims and Jews, right? Like, there are significant and serious barriers to that conversation, in the same way that there are barriers to bringing together, in some ways, evangelical students and those who aren't evangelical students, right? Because core to their theology is conversion. Like, we are bringing folks on board. So how do we get past these, what can seem to be intransigent barriers, and work together for some good? It is possible, and ILIs help you come together with like-minded people to think about how we can resolve these seemingly intransigent issues that divide us instead of bring us together.
I've seen a couple of hands. I'm assuming you all have stories of things that have gone pear-shaped. No. Okay, so we're going to come to actually like general questions to throw at us later. Is that a pear-shaped story there, Terry?
Yes.
Yeah, you should tell us your pear-shaped story.
I have a story that has to do with Ask an Atheist Day and with working with other groups. We have two groups on our campus. One is Bible study, which is dying. There's like 3 members. It's not going to be here. And the other is the Christians on campus who have refused to work with us. They don't want to. So last year we had our Ask an Atheist Day. We decided to do it as a tabling event, and we had to do it at a different day than National Ask an Atheist Day. We had Heather Henderson and Emery from Ardent Atheists with us. And it was great, and we had a table, and I was thinking I'm going to have to apologize to Heather and Emery later because there's like not too many people here and they're just sitting here all day. Well, one thing that you need to know about our campus is it's within 5 miles of Ray Comfort's Living Waters Church. So the first hour was very slow, and then it started to rain. We were under a tarp, and then all of a sudden we had a busload of evangelicals come and visit us from Ray Comfort's camp. And they gathered under a tree and discussed things, and they had 5 or 6 of them on every one of us. We considered it a success because, one, we got their attention, and a lot of people heard about it, and 2, we lasted 2.5 hours being calm and having conversations instead of getting frustrated. So we're looking forward to this semester because this semester we're inviting the Satanic Temple. So we'll see what happens. But
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. So I want to come back to some of the positive things. I'm going to see if I can get our panelists to share something that they have experienced in Interfaith that was an unexpected benefit or something that went better than expected. If you can come up with things that have happened.
Certainly. And Liz, I think we can maybe actually tackle this one a bit together.
Sure.
So it was 2014 or 2013 and 2014.
We're talking about the potatoes?
We're talking about the potatoes and that whole event in general.
It was 2014.
So we were at the President's 4th Annual Interfaith
A Community Service Campus Challenge, PICSCC, because the government is good at acronyms.
And so we were at the Unity Walk, which was the day before the actual event took place. And we were there with Nick Stancato and a couple of us.
Samuel Jackson,
Right, Gordon?
Gordon might have been there. A whole bunch of us.
A bunch of us were there. And we stopped off at a Catholic church, and they were packing crazy amount of potatoes to take to the food bank.
We're talking like semi-truckload of potatoes. There's more potatoes than you've ever seen in your life.
And so we're having a competition because we got the potatoes bagged and we need to get the potatoes in the truck. And so we've got 2 lines and I'm like, we have some potatoes and we're gonna win, you guys, and our team, her line's better. And this woman turns to me and she goes, what's your name? My name is, whatever her name was. What tradition are you from? And I said, my name's Lori, I'm an atheist. And she immediately said, what are you doing here? Like, why are you here? Which is a microaggression, right? She was genuinely confused. I do not believe that she meant to, come off the way that, it was like, what are you doing here? But I'm just like, oh, well, I like to do good too, and this seems really important, and and I totally want our line to win, so let's stop talking and let's get moving. And she was fine, and things were great, and I think our line did win.
I don't remember.
I'm just gonna go on record.
Laura's line will totally won.
We totally won. So it's just being open about my identity and just being accepted, like that was really awesome, and like I said, we won. But beside that, the very next day, Liz and I gave a workshop on religious privilege to a room of largely religious students. So try and put yourselves in our shoes for a moment. We are two atheists talking about religious privilege to a room of religious students. But I feel like we were very thoughtful.
I think and the room, the thing that stood out to me was that room wanted to hear it. We gave a similar talk at ACPA later that year, and in both cases, the people present knew that religious privilege was a problem. They wanted to be able to do something about it and just didn't know how. And so I was really surprised with how open and how interested they were in learning this and hearing about the experiences that we've experienced and that we've seen our students experience, and ways to overcome that.
Right, to be very candid with you and to use some language that I think JT might appreciate, I felt like we were Daniel walking into the lion's den. Two atheists going and talking about this, and to be very candid and open with you, I was terrified. I was scared out of my mind. I was like, I don't know how this is gonna go down, but I'm gonna do my best. And to be so warmly received, right? And for people to just, you see, that's one of the great benefits, I think, of being up here and speaking, or, being a professor or whatever. Sometimes you get to see the light bulb happen. And, to see that, to be so warmly received, like, it quelled any of my fears. I was absolutely shocked and surprised and delighted, and it made me want to engage in this work more.
Any surprising, better than expected stories over there?
Maybe just a nice story. So one common, if not the only idea that a lot of people think of when they hear interfaith is like, oh, we should do a debate with a religious group. Let's debate them. Like, well, that's not the only thing you can do. There are so many other ways you can interact with other groups. AHA did do a debate with Badger Catholic. We have a strong relationship with them, and we like planning stuff with them, so we thought, heck, why not? And this past semester, we did a debate with them, and the questions were philosophy of science, what's our moral obligation to the environment, and something else similar to that. But a lot of people who came to the event hear the word debate, AHA versus Badger Catholic, and they're like, oh, it's gonna get bloody, like, let's go, man. And they were like, oh, what? Like, we're talking just philosophy and ethics, and it's it was very surprising for a lot of people, and some of them came up to, the, I guess, debaters after, and were like, I can't believe you guys hugged afterwards. That was so weird to see that you guys don't hate each other. And I'm like, no, we hang out. We're going to get dinner together. Even just being a real life example of being friends can pleasantly surprise other people who, just think that Christians or really any faith and atheists just go head to head and hate each other, when really there are so many examples of when we can work together and just love each other.
That's really beautiful. So I'm gonna be honest with y'all. The reason that I'm here is because one of my identities, or several of my identities, is marginalized. And one of the things that I'm looking for are accomplices, right? Because I know a lot of people, there's the language around being good allies, which is fine. I want people to be good allies, but I need accomplices. So if I'm indicted, what that means is you're indicted because you're my accomplice, right? And in terms of doing interfaith work, it's it's beautiful to see that, right? Because I think the relationships that develop, you become accomplices. So when injustices are happening, one of the most beautiful stories that I've heard, we have trainers that do ILIs, right? And accommodations were not being made for, food accommodations weren't being made for Jewish and Muslim students. And it was an evangelical Christian that was standing with Muslim and Jewish students, advocating to administration and their student government to have kosher and Muslim appropriate meals for these students. So the reason that interfaith work is so important is because we need each other. There'll be times when you all are experiencing marginalization on your campus, and if you have accomplices, you can call up the homies and say, look, they coming for us. Or your homies will say, look, you know, the humanist organization, we heard they were trying to take your space. So we stopped them because we know that the politics weren't right. So for me, I think it's important to be in this space because we need each other, especially when we experience marginalization on our campuses. We can have each other's backs. I feel like I hope y'all will have my back and know that I have yours, because I think, as cliche as this sounds, we are really better together. And if we can build solidarity and unity, there's a lot of strength in transforming some of the systemic social ills that we face. And we've seen it happen, and it's a beautiful thing. So to me, that's always the inspiring moments or surprising moments, is when the folks who I would make assumptions about not wanting to be in solidarity with folks actually do those things.
And if I can just say, and it speaks to what Nicole was saying, JT and I are both doctoral candidates that come from different traditions, but our work is really similar. And I got to meet JT like at ACPA a few years ago, but this weekend we've really, I think, at least you can weigh in if you disagree, JT, but I think we've set a foundation to build a really beautiful friendship. And not to, this goes back to interfaith on more of a micro level. Whenever I know now that whenever things are getting rough with my dissertation, I'm gonna call up my homie over here, right? And I know that he's gonna have my back, because we're doing this work and we have very similar goals, and now we have this beautiful friendship. And at the same time, anytime my homie over here calls me up, I'm gonna be there and I'm gonna have his back.
So I'm getting a big wave of, we're gonna get started wrapping up here in just a couple of minutes. So we could go one of two directions. So I'm gonna ask you guys to raise some hands for me. I have one question left up here, which I think is an interesting question. And so I'm gonna tell you that question, and then we can see if we wanna explore that question a little bit, or if we want to open it up to your questions. So the question that I have is, we've been talking a lot about interfaith dialogue, but Lori had pointed out that oftentimes interfaith gets stuck at dialogue, and that there's a question of how do we move that into action. So that would be the question that I would ask our panelists to explore. So as show of hands if we want to go explore that direction of the rabbit hole versus the other direction of the questions that you guys have. So the dialogue into action side, hands. Hearing from you guys. All right, so here's what I'm gonna do. Because SSACon is a place to begin conversations and not finish them, those of you who do want to have conversations, come on up and snag us afterwards. We will be here. I'm gonna kick everybody off the stage, so they'll be like over there. And we can continue those conversations. But for now, we're gonna go with democracy and hear a little bit about our ideas about getting from dialogue into action in an interfaith setting.
So I'll kick it off. I know at IFYC we have a clear methodology in terms of moving beyond dialogue, and our model is voice, engage, and act. So if you come to the ILI, we unpack that further. I know y'all are tired of hearing me plug it, but yo, they're paying for me to be here, so I gotta say
It's a totally great program. I recommend it. SSA may be able to give you some funding to get there. So look into it if it sounds interesting.
And if you want to go, come and talk to me. We have scholarships and we can make some things happen. But the reason I bring it up is because each of us have a voice and a story, and it's important for us to voice and share those stories and engage with each other. And the beauty of interfaith work is that it doesn't good interfaith work doesn't deny difference, right? Like, it's not only us looking at the things that we share in common, but it's also those areas of deep disagreement. And how can we continue to remain in community with each other when we disagree on stuff? So that's voice, engage, we talk about the similarities and differences, but then we act, right? Because in the conversation, when we elicit our shared values, that's gonna lead us to some shared points of action. So if we care about homelessness, if we care about poverty, if we care about racism, then we're gonna work as a coalition to dismantle some of those issues that we see together, so.
I will say that we talk about dialogue and action, but maybe dialogue and action are not different things. So the greatest resistance that I've seen, not necessarily things that have gone pair up, but the greatest resistance has come from my own community and people that, atheists that don't want to engage in interfaith dialogue or action. And so for me, part of action is actually going and having those difficult conversations with members of my own community and explaining how me doing interfaith work, really is an exercise of my own autonomy. Right? We love autonomy, right? We love being able to do our own thing. And so I go and part of my action is trying to talk to people within my own community about not publicly bashing interfaith work, not publicly opposing it. Hey, if you don't want to do it, don't do it, just like Liz said. But I do, and some of us do want to do that. And so, maybe just a little bit so that, we can do, those of us who do want to do that work can do that work without fearing of not being atheist enough.
And I think another great way to, move from dialogue to action is just by having those strong relationships. So it may not even be on purpose. You may just be with somebody of a different faith because you went to go grab coffee with them or something. And it doesn't necessarily have to be labeled interfaith work. But maybe somebody falls off their bike and you both work together to help them, right? That's coming to, you're fighting for a common goal. And it's not necessarily a coordinated, program, but you're still working with another individual that you have deep differences with, and you did something good as a result. And so honestly, I feel like those relationships are so strong that oftentimes they lead to action without even trying.
Awesome. I'm getting the final sign is coming up, so I'm going to say thank you to all of our panelists today. Thank you to you as an audience. Let's give a round of applause, and I'll release you.